What happens when you punish your friends like enemies? The United States just found out, and the consequences are still unfolding, not in loud speeches or fiery protests, but in the cold, quiet reconfiguration of global power. Toyota, Honda, Nissan. These aren't foreign intrusions. They are part of America's industrial DNA. They build nearly 1/3 of all the cars on U.S. roads, not in Beijing, not in Berlin, but in Tennessee, Alabama, and Ohio. And yet, Washington targeted them like threats. In one sweeping move. The White House imposed 25% tariffs on imported vehicles, effectively dragging America's closest Asian ally, Japan, into a trade war they didn't start. The cars weren't even made in China. Many were crafted in North America, in Baja California, in Ontario, in Aguascalientes. Decades of economic partnership erased with a single stroke of a pen. So, what did Japan do? It didn't shout. It didn't threaten. It didn't protest. It executed. And what's unfolding now could quietly reshape the entire global auto industry and the very foundations of U.S. influence in Asia. The ties that built an industry. By 2024, Japanese automakers were not just popular in the United States, they were essential. 1 out of every 3 cars on American roads wore a Japanese badge. Toyota was number 1. Honda sat at number 3. Nissan at number 6. But here's the part that Washington seemed to overlook. Most of these cars weren't imported. They were built in America, by Americans, for Americans. Japanese companies had spent decades building deep roots across North America. In 2024 alone, they sold nearly 5.9 million vehicles in the U.S., a 6.3% increase over the previous year. In 2023, they built over 3.2 million vehicles inside the U.S., almost 1/3 of all cars made in the country. Their footprint spanned 27 states. They ran 29 major manufacturing plants, 34 research centers, and hundreds of logistics and distribution hubs. Together, they employed over 400,000 Americans directly. Indirectly? According to research by Dr. Thomas Prusa of Rutgers University, these companies supported over 2.29 million American jobs when including suppliers, dealers, and service networks. In towns like Marysville, Ohio, or Georgetown, Kentucky, Japanese automakers weren't foreign invaders. They were the heartbeat of local economies. And they weren't done. Toyota was investing $13.9 billion into a next-gen battery plant in Greensboro, North Carolina, expected to create over 5,000 jobs. Honda and Nissan were preparing major AV expansions. These weren't one-off partnerships. They were bets on the future of the U.S. economy. And then everything changed. A slogan, a shockwave. President Trump stood before reporters and called it economic self-defense. Protect American jobs, he said. Level the playing field. Bring car manufacturing back home. The slogan sounded patriotic, but the reality? Devastating. The tariffs didn't hit cheap Chinese imports. They hit cars built by Americans, using North American parts, assembled under trade rules the U.S. had signed. This wasn't an attack on unfair trade. It was an attack on regional integration, on NAFTA, on USMCA, on decades of trust, and it sent a message that echoed far beyond Detroit. Even loyalty doesn't buy protection. Japan's quiet escape. When the news hit Tokyo, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida moved quickly. He appealed to Washington. He reminded them of the shared history, the economic interdependence, the decades of cooperation. But behind closed doors, Japanese companies weren't waiting for answers. They were already moving. Nissan quickly slashed output of its top-selling U.S. model, the Rogue. It sold 245,000 units in 2024, many built in Japan and now exposed to tariffs. In response, Nissan cut production by 13,000 vehicles at its Kyushu plant and rerouted supply chains. Toyota expanded operations in Thailand, dodging U.S. duties through its global footprint. Mazda launched a $150 million EV production line in Thailand's Eastern Economic Corridor, targeting 100,000 units per year. This wasn't panic. It was preparedness. Since 2018, Japan's auto giants had anticipated that American protectionism might someday turn inward. So they planned for it, building contingency supply chains, diversifying production, and laying the groundwork for something much larger, a quiet exit from dependence on the United States. The Great Pivot. What happened next wasn't publicized. In speeches, it wasn't televised. But it was seismic. Tokyo began redrawing the map. The U.S. was no longer seen as a reliable economic partner. So Japanese companies began shifting their bets to Southeast Asia and China, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia. These weren't just low-cost alternatives. They were politically stable, free of U.S. tariffs, and hungry for investment. Billions poured in. But the boldest move? Toyota's $2 billion agreement with Shanghai to build a wholly owned EV factory in the Jinshan district. Not a joint venture. Not a partial stake. A fully owned, high-tech auto plant on Chinese soil designed to support Toyota's new energy vehicle, NEV strategy, and capture more of the world's largest car market. Toyota wasn't just hedging. It was redefining its future. And China welcomed them with open arms. China's game. While the U.S. alienated its allies, China extended its hand. Beijing offered sweetheart deals to Japanese and Korean firms, tax incentives, land grants, easier financing, and exclusive access to China's massive domestic market. And in return, just one thing: stay close. China wasn't just selling a market. It was selling an alternative order. One where Asian countries don't have to depend on Washington. Where trade flows through Beijing. Where China sets the rules, and Japan is listening. So is South Korea. Samsung, for instance, is reportedly exploring joint chip ventures with Chinese firms. Hyundai is expanding in Indonesia and Vietnam. Even Taiwan is threading the needle, balancing U.S. support with economic realities in China. The region is rebalancing, quietly, but deliberately. Pressure and paralysis. Back in Washington, U.S. officials are watching nervously. Behind the scenes, they're pressuring Tokyo and Seoul not to go too far, warning them that too much economic alignment with China could lead to reduced military cooperation, limited tech sharing, even cuts to intelligence support. But what's the alternative? The damage is done. The investments have started flowing elsewhere. The new factories aren't coming to Michigan. They're landing in Hanoi, in Chonburi, in Jakarta. It's not a crash. It's a slow bleed. U.S. plants won't shut down overnight. But new models won't be assigned there. New investments won't be made. Shifts will get shorter. Over time, will dry up. And then one day, without headlines or protests, people will realize something's changed. The U.S. once led the global trade order. It built NAFTA. It founded the World Trade Organization. It championed the Trans-Pacific Partnership before abandoning it. Now the vacuum is being filled by China, by ASEAN, even by old U.S. allies who no longer know if they can count on Washington. And if Japan, America's most trusted Asian partner, feels betrayed, what message does that send to others? If Toyota, Honda, and Nissan are being treated like threats, who's safe? Countries like Brazil, Canada, the EU, they're all watching. And if Washington continues weaponizing trade for domestic politics, how many will quietly begin to look elsewhere? How many will walk away? The final question, in trying to isolate rivals, has America isolated itself? And if the world is starting to build a new order without Washington, does Washington even realize it? Or has the U.S., in defending its borders, unwittingly redrawn the map against itself?